Just want you by myself. I've been tossing, turning, staying up all night long. Just want you by myself. I've been tossing, turning, staying up all night long. Just want you by myself. I've been tossing, turning, staying up all night long. Tell me, baby, what's the problem? 'Cause I could try to figure it out. Oh no, oh no. Tell me, baby, what's the problem? I'm only picking up what you're putting down. You'll be tripping, I don't know what about. So what's the problem right now? Okay. I've been tossing, turning.
Chapter 14:000 Tsunade could have smacked a bitch. I cleared the fucking tower for a reason? Where the hell are my umbu? Why didn't they stop you? She snarled. This was supposed to be a closed meeting, hence the emptying of the tower and why it was so important for her to kick Konohamaru out of the office quickly. She wouldn't have been so harsh with him if it weren't important that she got the place checked for fuinjutsu and such before she started this meeting. Danzo stepped forward, only to stop as Jiraiya stepped forward, arms folded, face grim as he tilted his head and arched an eyebrow, warning him without words that any aggressive movement towards the blonde woman would result in immediate protective measures, and Jiraiya's idea of protective measures usually involved giant toads, crushing and or being set on fire. The one-armed elder sniffed and brushed off the nonverbal threat. That is the thing, Tsunade Heim. They aren't your umbu yet, he pointed out slowly. This is a closed meeting, Shimura, the blonde woman growled, meaning classified. He sneered, unfortunately, Tsunade Heim, you don't have the authority to host one of those, or say who and who cannot be present. You aren't Hokage yet, he pointed out scathingly before brushing her off, his eyes flicking over those present. Toad Sage, Copy Nin, surviving Yondaime Guard, the loyal Uchiha, Harano, the Jinchuriki and I received intelligence of an unknown female wandering unchecked through the streets of Konoha. Not to mention her coincidental resemblance to the Uzumaki child. Amongst others, he added, flicking his eyes meaningfully at Jiraiya. The white-haired sage merely raised an eyebrow. Nichin. Attention diverted from Danzo with an almost jarring click at the sound of Naruto's voice high with concern as he cradled his sister's cheeks. For Harry, she was completely oblivious to the clamor starting up around her, too busy trying to deal with the whirlwind of memories and emotions that was Kabuto's mind as his whipped itself into a storm, bursting out of its room to lash out at her mind. She was completely unaware of the blood that ran like a river from her nostrils, or the slow ooze from her ruptured ears. You used to be called the walking maiden, and now you're just a babysitter. I haven't seen you in a while, but you look somewhat worn out, Nano. I think it would be easy for a thief to enter the orphanage. You should be careful, they might kidnap your children too. There are many ways to employ kids without a family or an identity. One of our men died to get that piece of information. I'll get one of your kids to replace him. The new Jinchuriki for the Hakubi is a young Chuyunin by the name Kira Bii. Here is the full profile you requested. He's set to partner with Jounin Heavy Combat Specialist A. The majority of his information is classified. My apologies, Danzo-sama, this was the totality I could gather on Jounin A. Observe, Kabuto. Hang in the back, behind the tree, lean and study Hanzo's methods and attacks. When the time is right, we will take aim no kuni. After the salamander has removed the pestilence that is Akatsuki's Yahiko, we can't afford a martyr to rally the people against the leaf. Not bad, kid. I'm surprised you were able to escape my fire attack. The defection of aka no Sasori from Tsunagaku or no Sato, it seems as though he had some kind of altercation with Suna Eldercho, his paternal grandmother. Who are you? I'll be straightforward. Root decided to get rid of both you and mother. You were too skilled as spies, and now you know too much. At times, information can be more powerful than weapons and jutsu. They currently see you as dangerous. Long and slow brainwashing, it's one of Root's favorite tricks. I will protect you from Danzo. I'll give you a new background. As a child you were found in the Battle of Kikyu Pass and raised by the captain of the medical team. When you go back to Danzo's place, on the surface you will be the child of Captain Nanoyakushi. From now on you are reborn as Kabuto Yakushi. Memories, voices, images, emotions? They whipped and howled through her mind, scathing the walls and scratching at the tapestries. Grisly scenes of dead bodies, living bodies, eyes the color of blood being plucked from their skulls, pure white orbs that glowed with an inner light. Implanted into the faces of children with a shadowy figure stood in the background. Children taken from the crib. Technique scrolls stolen in the dead of night. Screaming as needles tore flesh and injected chakra-infused ink into seals across flesh and muscle. Brutal training. Torture. Murder. Passing out orders to kill. Attack his face. A boy she knew was called Shisui, his face bloody and his eye socket a gaping red and empty maw. The bodies of women, children, the elderly, the healthy, the Uchiha clan littering the streets like a mockery of discarded gum wrappers on Dudley's bedroom floor. This is the least we can do, to protect the leaf? She had to get away from him? Had to escape. Get Naruto somewhere safe. Get the children somewhere safe. Away from him? Get away from Danzo. Escape? Escape now? She lunged forward, slipping past Tsunade where she flung her arms out and swept the three genin against her. Varying squeaks and yelps of surprise drowned out in the sound of Tsunade and Jiraiya's calls for her to stop, before they were apparat away, drowning the world away in a crack and rush of displaced air. Away to the only place in Konoha that she knew of, the only place where Danzo had no control and no operatives. He had killed them all the day he betrayed Mother, betrayed Kabuto, and Nano. The group of four landed clumsily on the roof of the hospital, Harry falling to his hands and knees, vomiting hard enough to spit up blood as he trembled and sweated under the onslaught of memories. Thankfully, she'd released the kids before she ralphed, so none of them got covered in the stuff, though with how Naruto was fluttering around him and fussing he may end up slipping up in the stuff. Nichan? What's wrong? Naruto begged, hands gently touching here and there, almost afraid of breaking her as he took to pulling her hair aside so it wouldn't trail in the same pile of blood-streaked bile. What the hell kind of technique was that? Sasuke spluttered in horror, whipping around wildly. We weary back at the hospital, Sakura gaped. That's half a mile from the Hokage's office. In just a split second, Sasuke breathed, still staring around, his eyes wide. Harry coughed and spat a mix of blood and bile to the side. I want you all to listen, he rasped, looking up at the three genin. I need one of you to go and find Yamanaka Inoichi. Tell him that something triggered Kabuto's memories and now it's all going crazy mad in my head. Hurry. I'm going to need help to get it all under control again. He's got some pretty strong memories and emotions about that bandaged guy. I need someone else to fetch a medic nin who specializes in head trauma. Tsunade and Shizun would be best, but they're probably busy and too far away. He swallowed, bowing his head as he tried to dredge up the words. I think this is an aneurysm. Or something? I don't know. But I need some medical help. I'll get Yamanaka-san, Sakura volunteered. I know all the shortcuts to Ino Pig's place and her dad's usually in the shop this time of day, she added, glancing at the sky before turning and running to the side of the roof and using her chakra to race down the side of it. She didn't wait for Sasuke's approval of her plan. She knew she was the best person for this job. I'll get the medic, Sasuke agreed. He saw enough of them the first time he had been under the Tsukuyomi technique years ago. He had the trauma ward memorized down to the air ducts he used to escape once. He turned and ran back into the stairwell, planning on grabbing Kusashi-san. He was the most down-to-earth and prepared of the trauma medics he knew. The man was good with delicate work, which often meant he was sent out on missions where severe injuries were a high possibility. What about me, Nichan? What can I do to help? Naruto asked, rubbing her back, desperately wanting to do something but being unsure of how to help or what to do. This was just like when his brain broke itself back when they were hunting for Bachan. Keep me awake. Talk to me. Tell me about Konoha, the streets, the people. Tell me about Team 7 and your time at the academy. Omino-sensei seemed kind. Is he really? Harry asked, having to pause a little sometimes to force his words out coherently. He was starting to slur his speech. Not good. He nodded and used his sleeve to mop up as much blood as possible, already off and talking about his time at the academy, about Amino Irika, the rest of the rookies he graduated with and how they behaved in school. He kept his voice low so as not to damage her ears further, but didn't let her drop off, didn't let her sleep. His orange sleeve was scarlet and brown by the time Suzuki returned with the medic nin, a rather pleasant-faced man in white scrubs and glasses. Barely a second later, Yamanaka Inoichi appeared with Harano in a whirlwind of leaves. 000 We really need to stop meeting this way, Uzumaki-chan, the blonde Yamanaka stated with a wry grin as he stepped through the scorched doors of her mental scape. The girl in question was jumping around catching small white cards that wildly flew through the air, slashing into the walls of her mind leaving ugly tears. She dropped to the ground and narrowed her eyes at him. She looked tired and more than a little worse for wear. I'm not exactly happy about it either, Yamanaka-san. I didn't expect to encounter someone so foul in Konoha. That man should be arrested for everything he's done, she spat. She had half a mind to say he deserved the kiss, but given how she only knew information from Kabuto's point of view, from what Orochimaru had told him, perhaps she was being too hasty in calling for his execution in such a way. Knowing both sides of the story would be good. May I ask who you're talking about? Inoichi asked, frowning at the chaos around him. It looked like the stolen memories had been triggered into violent chaos. They had been disconnected but now looked to be trying to reconnect forcefully within her mind, as if attempting to take control of it and force action or reaction. In this case, violence. It looked like a broken attack trigger he often found within Black Band IWA sleeper nin, the ones who were sent on suicide missions with the sole purpose of killing one high-priority target before being struck down. Often triggered by sound or a specific verbal tick unique to the target. Sometimes, if the medic nin implanting the trigger were skilled enough, it could even be triggered by a specific scent or symbol. The girl glanced over at him and blew a strand of hair off her face. She flipped through the cards in her hand until she found a specific one and flicked it to him. Shimura Danzu. He's responsible for, she trailed off, frowning and scowling, bloodline theft, child abduction, grave robbing, assassination of Konoha citizens, illegal genetic experimentation. He carried out unauthorized missions, undermined the Sandaime Hokage, attempted to undermine Shishio, worked with Orochimaru in his experiments, aided Salamander Hanzo in attacking the fledgling Akatsuki, thus turning them into a legitimate threat against Konoha. He fucked around with Kabuto to such an extent that he drove him straight into Orochimaru's willing grasp and turned him into what basically amounts to an S-ranked threat to our country. Imagine what would have happened if Kabuto had decided to share all his classified information with Iwagakure or Kirigakure, or even Kumagakure. Konoha would have been trashed and destroyed within a month. Inoichi was white by the time the girl had finished explaining. He knew that Danzo was often up to no good, but this took the biscuit. The man was on the Council of Elders. His authority was limited to advising the Hokage only. True, in order to effectively advise, he had to be privy to not only their spy networks, classified information, but also as much of Konoha's dirty secrets and foreign affairs as possible. They were basically secondary Hokages who took over as a group should the current Hokage fall. It sounded as if Danzo had been acting as a Hokage from the background, in secret and working with some of their worst criminals. What bloodlines have been stolen? He asked, rolling his sleeves up and getting to work. He coated his hands with chakra, providing a barrier between his mind and the memories he was handling. Given how the memories were attempting to reconnect, they needed to not only break the connections again, but order them before sealing them and then removing them. Complete removal was impossible, and in this girl's case, Inoichi was beginning to think that sealing them away would be a shame. Most people's minds were not able to handle so much information so effectively. Her mind was still functioning even with a second one trying to enforce his will over her own. She had managed to maintain an effective control over herself and responded to what she saw as a threat in a passive-aggressive fashion by removing what she deemed to be the high-priority targets from the area and taking them to a perceived safe location. In other words, she removed the only Kekii Genkai user from the area along with the Jinhyuriki and a girl with strong emotional ties to them both, and thus vulnerable to trigger commands and manipulation/brainwashing that would put them both at threat. All the while with her brain trying to kill itself. Impressive. Several members of his private army have implanted Byakugans, 1 or 2 have Sherigans. There are children abducted from both clans and techniques stolen from both your family and others, she explained, taking up an oddly sleek-looking broomstick and mounting it of all things. Inoichi stared for a moment until with a small flex of her legs she was airborne, the broomstick easily bearing her up through the air by its own power. He gaped as suddenly she turned into some kind of airborne hunter and scooped up card after card after card with falcon-like dives and sweeps, hands lashing out and snatching them out of the air like a jounin did a genin's wild kunao throw. He himself has both Sharinon and Mokuton. She finished making Inoichi drop the memory he had just picked up. Mokuton, he echoed in horror. She nodded, catching the last of the wildly flying cards and coming to a stop, hovering in front of him. Kabuto worked with Orochimaru on his Shodei experiments. A number of the children provided for the project were from Danza's private army. When the Sandaime caught him and ran him off, he sealed the labs. When word reached Danza that a single child remained alive, Kabuto implanted the cells within his ruined arm at his command and Orochimaru's agreement. They were both curious about the results. She didn't add that Kabuto had been secretly hoping that it would kill the old man who murdered Mother. The Yamanaka shook his head. Let's get this all sorted out. Then we'll take the information for study in the T&I division, he told her, picking up the fallen memory again. She nodded and moved away on her broomstick. For the next few hours they gathered and organized the chaotic pieces of Kabuto's mind. Inoichi saw more of young Miss Uzumaki's mind and couldn't help but dip a finger into one or two memories, learning more about the young lady and the world she had been hiding in. He learned about her cooking and cleaning like a slave for her family, living in a cupboard. Her life wasn't as unhappy as most, but it was heartbreakingly akin to that of her younger brothers. The cold eyes, the judgmental comments, the emotional abuse and bullying from those who should have taken care of her. He saw incredible technology that if utilized within Konoha would truly turn them into an incredible military superpower. It would cement their position as a nation that you did not want to attack. No one would risk war with them. He learned about the people she essentially could call her genin team, the red-haired boy with the tactical mind that would have Shikaku itching to challenge him to a game of Go, after explaining the rules to him, and a young girl with enough intelligence that would make her a good fit for any intelligence-based division within the village. He learned that she was the best flyer in her home, that she became the youngest seeker in over 100 years, a position that involved retrieving a tiny golden orb in what basically amounted to a low-level battlefield. He was betting that she had some form of futon affinity. Eventually they both managed to gather everything up and disconnected into one of the side rooms. He watched in curiosity as the girl commanded 2 suits of armor to stand outside and placed a portrait guardian over the door in order to prevent any more breakouts. "Thank you, that feels a lot better," the girl stated, leaning back against the wall. He shrugged a shoulder. It was educational. He had deeply enjoyed the chance to explore such a complex mind. "Unfortunately, we're going to have to take you to the T&I division immediately. His mind is disconnected right now, but there could be another trigger. We should deal with this ASAP." A grimace of discomfort wrote itself across her face. "Oh, very well," she muttered unhappily. He refrained from patting her on the head like he would his Ino-chan. Having seen her memories, he felt a tad protective of her, not to mention she was one of Minato and Kushina's little ones, whom he went to the academy with. He had always had a few suspicions about Naruto, but suspicions weren't good enough, so he just kept his eye on him and gave his Ino the hiding of a lifetime when he caught her bullying him once. He would not accept that kind of behavior from her, ever, no matter who it was she was abusing. Now that he knew that the boy was his classmate's son, and not just the kitsune replicating his face onto its host to spite them as the rumors howled, Inoichi would be keeping a much closer and much more protective eye on him. His shoulder went cold and the distinct static feeling of someone touching his physical body shuddered through his mental projection. "We should go. It seems as though the Umbu are here and require our attention," he told her. She sighed and slid down the wall, looking gray and more than a little tired, rubbing at one of Kushina's green eyes. He smiled a little wryly. She was a little too old to be given piggybacks, but he did slip his arm under her waist and lift her easily off the ground and back to her feet. "Come on, they're getting impatient." The cold on his shoulder was steadily getting uncomfortable and tingly to the point of stinging. She gave him an odd look and stepped away, out of arm's reach, and he had to refrain from frowning a little at the reminder of her ingrained reactions from childhood. They left. 000. The headache was dull, but the sunlight still hurt like a bitch. She groaned weakly, face feeling tacky and stiff. "Nichan." He heard the tremulous whimper of his younger brother. "Please, Uzumaki-kun, she'll be fine, but her head is rather sensitive. It's best she stay lying down and not be disturbed," A second, older, voice soothed and scolded in equal measure. It was smooth and low. Must have been the medic nin that Suzuki collected. Sorry Kusashi-sensei, Uzumaki-chan needs to come to interrogation. We need to extract those memories for study and seal the more emotionally charged information. A third voice, Inoichi, broke in. He sounded a little rough-voiced but apologetic enough. No, Naruto hissed lowly, sounding more threatening than she had ever heard him. Until she's better, Nichan isn't going anywhere. He snarled and she felt air shift over her skin and could tell Naruto had taken a defensive position above her. Naruto, Inoichi barked, sounding even more severe than he had when they first met in the interrogation room. She needs to have these memories dealt with or she will relapse when a memory with particularly strong emotions attached to it triggers. Please? Ino told me some really bad things can happen when memories are messed with. Haruno's voice piped up. Anxiously. Flinching, he opened his eyes, cringing away from the bright sunlight. Naruto was crouched above him, hands twitching towards his shuriken holsters, but thankfully hadn't drawn any weapons. His sleeves and clothes were slathered with blood, her blood. No wonder he was so distressed with the idea of Inoichi taking him away from the medic nins. He could see the pleasant-faced medic nin. With Suzuki hovering behind him, Inoichi's stern face bearing down on Naruto like a disappointed parent with Haruno stiff and anxious behind him, wringing her hands, and a pair of white animal-masked umbu off to the side observing behind their sightless eye slits. She shifted and sat up, wrapping an arm around the blonde 12-year-old's waist and pulled him down against her in a hug. She couldn't have spoken anything if she wanted to, too tired. But cuddling wasn't out of the question. It seemed to shut him up as he shifted and clung tightly to her clothing. He looked up at Inoichi and nodded tiredly before lying his head down on top of Naruto's spiky mane, burying his nose in the coarse hair. Kusashi pushed his glasses up. Perhaps a compromise, he offered. As Uzumaki-kun is concerned. With Namikaze-chan's health, I will go with her into interrogation in order to guarantee her health. Is that acceptable? He suggested with a raised eyebrow. All eyes turned to the siblings, the tired girl with her face buried in her brother's hair, a pair of sapphire eyes peeking out from over her shoulder. Can I come too? He asked quietly. Anyone else would have been worried with how attached the Jinhyuriki was being to the relatively unknown girl, but Inoichi could only sigh in mild relief. Having witnessed her memories, he knew she would die to protect him and work solely towards his happiness and well-being. Hori would never betray Naruto, and Naruto would never betray Konoha. With them like this, someone would finally take care of Naruto properly. With some personal support, he would likely blossom into quite the fearsome shinobi. And given how Hori was, she would be taking Suzuki under her wing as well. Sakura had a family, but they didn't quite understand her drive to be a shinobi. As much as they accepted and were proud of her, they still didn't understand what she faced every time she stepped outside of the village gates. Unless Sakura had problems at home, Hori would be support in a distant way. She wouldn't be a family. Inoichi repressed a grin when the mental image of Kakashi being mothered was added. The white-haired jounin would join in the brood when Hori got a better idea of how damaged he was. She wasn't the motherly type, but she cared enough to do something which very few people in the jounin's life did. Yes, it's fine. Please come along. Are you two going to tackle my legs if I tell you to stay here? Inoichi asked, looking at the remaining two genin. Sakura nodded firmly, eyes flicking to the blonde-haired girl with a wince of guilt. Suzuki folded his arms and didn't say anything, face stony, neither agreeing or disagreeing. Mainly because he didn't know how he felt about this whole thing. The two faceless umbu exchanged glances. One turned and raced off while the other stepped forward and gently picked the two siblings up, not even bothering to try and pry the genin off the blonde girl. Harry guessed they had tried to do it before and gotten bitten for their efforts. There was a nasty-looking bite mark on his upper arm. Naruto sniffed a little and burrowed back into her, arms and legs squeezing tightly. By the time they arrived, Jiraiya was waiting for them with an impatient look on his face. The second the umbu appeared, his arms were empty and the toad sage had both of his students' children bundled up in his arms. Inoichi blinked in surprise. The umbu flexed his empty arms with an almost comical look of surprise as the toad sage bent his head over the two, forehead pressing against the back of Naruto's skull and Hari's forehead. He was fairly certain that when he saw Hari's nose start to bleed, his heart stopped. Then she flung herself forward, gathering up the kids and vanished. Vanished while suffering some kind of mental trigger, likely from Kabuto's mind, which if it regenerated like his body, had the high risk of possessing her, thus the reason for abducting the Uchiha as well. But here she was, tired and weak, Naruto wrapped around her, protective and scowling with Inoichi and the rest of Team 7 flanking him. Where were they? He asked, glancing over at Inoichi. The hospital roof. Kabuto's memories had a negative reaction to Danzo. With good reason from what I could see. We'll talk more inside. Cat, could you gland fetch my cousin please? Buddha was better at memory extraction than he was. Jiraiya nodded and turned on heel, without waiting for them, and marched inside towards one of the isolation cells for friendlies. He wasn't leaving these kids for a single second until Tsunade had dealt with Danzo. Following after him, Inoichi found his palms sweating at the thought of what they were going to find sleeping within Kabuto's mind. That's the end of this chapter. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe for more and to help this channel grow. See you.